Yeah, I could have stayed as an artist until I realized it was just an illusion. I was still as enslaved as other people. We are pushing an ideology, but I did not know that he could sink that low. That makes him worse than I mean. It angers very many Ugandans. But again, I'm alive to the fact that we are in Uganda. I want to get my freedom or die trying to get my freedom.
As part of our continuing partnership with The Elephant, we now have an interview from one of the most sought-after politicians in East Africa, Robert Kyagulanyi, or as most East Africans know him, Bobi Wine. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, bro.
So, I think the first question, of course, is why you, why this moment? Why Bobi Wine as a symbol for revolution in East Africa? Or do you even hold yourself up as one?
Well, I didn't choose this. And if I was asked to choose, I wouldn't choose to go through what I went through to be here, but you know, like fate had it, I'm here. I only raised my voice like one of the many young people in Uganda and of course in East Africa, trying to look better, especially when I know that I deserve better. Yeah. I just try to raise my voice as a contribution to the upliftment of the many voices. And this is where I've ended up.
And of course, you know, most people knew you as an artist prior to 2016, 2017. And you could have stayed as one. What drove you into politics?
Yeah, I could have stayed as an artist. I was comfortable and free until I realized it was just an illusion, you know. I still look at myself as an artist, although I look at myself as an artist conscious enough to want to play a role, you know. I went into leadership. I don't like calling it politics, man, because the word politics has kind of lost meaning, especially in Uganda.
It's a dirty word for you?
It's a dirty word for most young people. So I went into leadership because I had been talking about these things and I believed that it was time to act. And most importantly, I wanted to inspire other young people to take active part in the decision making and how their countries are governed. And I could not just explain, I wanted to demonstrate. Yeah.
There was an incident that you talked about and you've spoken about publicly in a nightclub that you went after buying your new Escalade. Maybe just give us a short version of that and how it impacted your life in politics.
Man, it's a tough night. It's a tough night. I'd been comfortable, you know, all the injustices that were affecting other people were not affecting me because I was a superstar, I was a celebrity, and I was always friends with these powerful guys until one day this guy felt like I was stealing the show and girls were looking at me and I was crossing this monster ride. So I got offended and came and slapped the hell out of me and blamed me for showing off, yet I knew the country had owners. That's when I realized that no matter how famous or popular I became, no matter how successful I became, I was still as enslaved as other people. And that is one of the many events that happened that made me resolve that I will not condone any kind of injustice anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
the trajectory of your life going into leadership, as well as the trajectory of Yoweri Museveni's life going into leadership, a lot of people have tried to compare and contrast in terms of his participation with Frelimo, later on his support for RPF and for freedom movements and revolution movements across the region. What does transnational or transcontinental revolution look like to you? How do you envisage that? Does it look like the kind that Museveni had with a gun and a bush, or what does it look like to you?
As a matter of fact, I agree with the ideals of President Museveni, especially when he was still a young man. I believe that just like Dr. Martin Luther King put it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I really agree with President Museveni participating in the freedom movements and liberation struggles wherever he went. And I believe that's what everybody blessed with the ability should do. Only that, of course, I disagree with the violent method. I don't believe in any violence. I don't believe in shedding blood to free somebody. I believe that there are more peaceful ways of doing so. And I also believe that it should be done by all people so that no single individual takes, personally takes credit of that, because there would be a danger of him ending up enslaving other people because he or she has, you know, a feeling of what can I say, believes that he or she is the liberator and has that sense of entitlement.
Yeah. And that sense of entitlement, it's easy to be lured into it now, especially given your position. You know, you might hold a position of an MP for Kyaddondo East, right? But continentally, you're known by a lot of Africans as a person who symbolizes a new movement towards freedom and that sort of thing. How do you stop yourself from becoming that messiah that you're now fighting against in the shape of Yoweri Museveni?
Well, I've said it before that we don't need another messiah. We don't need another liberator. We should be each other's liberators. I believe that the solution is not another strong man, but strong institutions, because those institutions can even curtail the propping greed and sense of entitlement. But the solution to that is to make sure that people achieve their liberation as a people, not as an individual, so that people get that power to put whichever leader they want in that position. And that makes the people reserve the ability to even remove that leader and put another one. Yeah.
And this leads me to one of the questions that I've heard some people accuse you of. All language, no structure. What does it look like? What does a people power movement look like structurally? When you're talking about having people achieve their own aspirations, what does that look like in terms of a structure of leadership, in terms of a structure of institutions? Is there a plan that the people power movement has to be able to either set up or strengthen whatever is in Uganda currently?
I believe in structured leadership, but again, I'm alive to the fact that we are in Uganda, where the government over 3 decades has learned how to deal with any dissent, and they attack the structures. I've seen how they deal with the current opposition leaders and current opposition parties, and indeed many government apologists have advised us to structure ourselves. In my opinion, they want us to structure ourselves so they can be able to deal with us.
To manipulate.
Exactly. The people power movement calls upon everybody, regardless of their political party, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their economic class, to own the idea that power belongs to the people and all the people. And we spread that in styles that we've been blessed with. Bob Marley calls it a rub-a-dub style. You know, having been an artist, the same way that messages in my music have been disseminated, the same way that we've been able to reach out to everybody. For now, we are pushing an ideology that we want everybody to own so that everybody can have a structure. However, we are also cautious that our structures must not be known by the regime, because now we are having a regime that does not want people to come together.
So for you, talking about your structures publicly is giving away your strategy?
Definitely.
All right. I won't push further on that, but I want to ask you about Yoweri Museveni, August the 14th. I know you've recounted this a lot, but what in that period, what one series of events or what one event either changed or influenced your own perspective about Yoweri Museveni the man, Yoweri Museveni the leader, and the future of Uganda?
Well, I always knew that President Museveni could do anything to retain power, but I did not know that he could sink that low. You know, I am convinced that there was a plot to assassinate me, and I just left the car seat that I was sitting in less than 3 minutes when my driver sat there and he was shot dead. Anyway, the events of August the 13th in Arua opened my eyes to the fact that whatever one has to do with a given time, because I would not be here talking to you right now. It only strengthened my resolve to do whatever I do with a given little time, because you know we are living under a regime that could take anybody out anytime.
Yeah. And Yoweri Museveni has been accused of using these methods, and you've said that he could do anything.
Yes.
And you seem to be the opposing force to Yoweri Museveni's system. Would you do anything to be able to achieve the goals of people power?
I wouldn't do anything, because anything would literally mean anything. I respect human rights. I despise violence. We are non-violent, and we don't believe in violence. And we believe that we can use peaceful civil means to achieve what we want. I mean, it has been done before. We have blueprints of people like Nelson Mandela. We have blueprints of people like Martin Luther King. Kenya itself was where we are some 20-something years ago. Now, I'm not saying they are where they want to be, but at least, in my opinion, they are on the road towards where they want to be. Yeah. So I believe in peaceful revolution.
You know, you've drawn from a lot of inspiration in terms of leadership. Interestingly, a lot of current leaders are drawing inspiration from others in the region in terms of some of the negative policies they're applying. Uganda has the OTT tax. Tanzania has tax on bloggers. Kenya now has just implemented tax on mobile phone transactions and the use of the internet. It's almost as if these leaders, there's a joke that it's almost as if these leaders are in the same WhatsApp group and they're sharing these ideas. How then do you create a transnational movement that also counteracts these kinds of things? Or is it on the shoulders of Bobi Wine to do this on his own?
As a matter of fact, I believe that this is about the people, not about the leaders, because many times our leaders have let us down. For example, we are in the East African community, but in my opinion, it has many times projected itself like a president's club or a big man's club. What happened even when I was in incarceration here in Kenya and across Africa was the real meaning of people power. It actually opened my eyes to the fact that the people power movement is not only a Ugandan thing. It might have begun in Uganda, but it's a human thing, you know. It's a more of saying we are our brothers or our sisters keepers. I strongly believe that the more we people come together as people in the region, as people in the continent, as people that face the same kinds of oppression, and indeed as people that have same aspirations, we can be able to transform our lives. As a person, before I got the troubles in Arua, we were working on a song that has artists from Tanzania, artists from Kenya, and myself from Uganda, trying to use music and art to communicate to the wider masses in a nice but serious way.
Okay. Yeah. In terms of continental leadership, I just want to stay on this point a little bit. There's other people like Julius Malema of the Economic Freedom Fighters movement in South Africa. There are other leaders across Africa who are now standing up as symbols of perhaps a new style of politics. Is there a conversation between you and leaders like that to be able to kind of raise the consciousness of Africans across the continent?
Sure, there's a conversation. That's how I'm in Kenya. I was invited by the young Kenya parliamentarians, you know, particularly the Honorable Babu, you know, were in conversations with young leaders across the continent, and we continue to seek to link up, to think together, to imagine together the kind of Africa we want to grow old in, and of course the Africa we want to pass on to our children and their children.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've said that Museveni is worse than Idi Amin Dada. For people who grew up in that generation, that's very difficult to imagine. Why would you cast him in the same light as Idi Amin?
Well, first and foremost, I did not see President Idi Amin. I have seen President Museveni. Yes, I know Idi Amin was a dictator, but he was a dictator for 8 years. President Museveni has ruled, or in my opinion, misruled Uganda for 32 years and counting. And most importantly, one would be justified to find reason to forgive Idi Amin because Idi Amin was uneducated. Idi Amin was illiterate. President Museveni, in my opinion, is one of the most intelligent Ugandans. You know, he's widely traveled. He have seen oppression. So I expected, or Uganda expected better from him, to see that President Museveni is a kind of intelligent man that is using his intelligence and talent against Ugandans. That makes him worse than Amin. Yeah.
That angers you?
Well, it angers very many Ugandans.
But does it anger you?
Yeah, it angers me, but I would rather not be overcome by my anger, because the road, the journey that is ahead of us requires us to think beyond our emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is revolution for you a young man's game? I ask this because I want to know what happens when Bobi Wine, 10 years down the road, if people power becomes a movement that actually does bring change to Uganda. What happens to the Bobi Wine of the future? Is revolution a young man's game?
This is not just a young man's game, but it is no doubt a young man and young woman's responsibility. It has been said before that every generation has a responsibility to prepare for the next generation. And indeed, you know, culturally where I come from, there's an old saying that black hair is the one that prepares for all the hair, you know. It's important for us to recognize that we are in our prime. You cannot do in your old age what you cannot do now. We are in planning stages, and it is now when we still have the time, when we still have the energy, and when we are still blessed with various factors to play a part in creating the kind of world we want to live in. So this is a responsibility of all the young people to rise to the occasion. Of course, it's equally a responsibility of the old people to provide wise counsel, to provide guidance, to provide the benefit and wealth of experience that they have, so that we can come together. So ultimately, it's a game of the young, the youthful, and the old. But most importantly, the young people in their youthful years must recognize that they have a huge responsibility to rise to the occasion and accomplish what they will.
If Yoweri Museveni had a Damascus moment, the scales fell from his eyes, would Bobi Wine extend a hand in partnership to him?
Certainly. You see, President Museveni has not only been negative. We credit him for very many things. For example, his period between 1986 and 1996, we recognize that this guy sobered up the army. You had less errant soldiers. So there's so many achievements that Uganda got under Museveni, but unfortunately, the more he overstays his welcome, the more he overstays his usefulness, is the more he risks undoing everything and tarnishing his legacy. Okay. So I would be glad to, you know, to smile with President Museveni if he started behaving like the truthful grandfather that he claims he is. Yeah.
On personal life, you're a father, you're a husband. The events of August must have been specifically very hard on your wife, Barbara.
Yeah.
How does she reconcile with your fight now, given that she knows the cost to a man that she loves?
Man, that's a very hard question, to be honest with you. We've talked about it with my wife, but honestly, we never complete the conversation. Either she breaks down or I break down. We have been in love. We sacrificed so much, so many years of our youth so we could prepare a nice life, a successful life, could make enough money and live the, you know, remaining youthful years and enjoy. But to see that it's all turning into this is crazy. But I'm very glad that my wife recognizes the responsibility that has been bestowed upon our shoulders, me and her. Apart from the young men of Uganda looking at me, young women of Uganda, indeed, many parts of Africa and the world are looking at her as a symbol of female resistance. So we're always, you know, comforted with the fact that, you know, when you stand for what is right, God always stands with you. Yeah. So it is many times beyond our comprehension. We tend to leave it to God, because I can't honestly give you an answer.
You know, I'm asked this as well because I engage in certainly some dangerous things, but I mean, I'm not in the forefront like you. And certainly the question of what if Bobi dies has come across your mind. And that's a question that perhaps Barbara also has to confront.
Yeah, but bro, you will remember that we had a very talented artist called Moses Radio in Uganda who passed away recently. He was a very intelligent guy who I always engaged in a conversation. He was a supporter of President Museveni, and many times I engaged him in a debate, and he told me that his life was okay, but nobody is safe. You understand? We lost Moses Radio because he had what I would love to call an accident, but there was no single hospital that could save his life. He was rushed to a private clinic where he had to pay more than 2 million shillings per day. You see, nobody is safe in Uganda, so it doesn't matter right now. And besides, what is the purpose of living a life that is not dignified? We all want to live freely. So, like I said before, I want to live in a free world, especially now in 2018. I want to live in a free Uganda. I want to get my freedom or die trying to get my freedom.
Very strong words. I think my final question would be about the letter that you wrote to your children. It almost seemed as if, much as you had penned it and said that, you know, I'll see you, you know, when I come out. It almost seemed as if there was a hanging question mark about your future. And the question I want to ask is about passing on the seeds that you're planting in so many Africans at a personal level to your children. Do they understand the people power movement? Do they understand why Daddy spends so many times away, so many hours away from them? And do you think that they recognize the importance of what you're doing now?
My eldest son, who is 13, seems to understand, but the more he understands it is the more he gets disturbed. First of all, I did not know that I would be free, because back home our president has absolute power, and many people have unquestionably died just by raising their voice. I did not expect to get out, and I must credit my freedom to the many voices that were raised when I was in military incarceration. But again, I see it important to teach our children, all our children, whenever we can, because we don't know how long we are going to be with them. I would love to watch my children grow. I want to attend my son's wedding and my daughter's weddings. Like any human being, man. I want to see myself bald-headed and gray-haired, you know. But these are things that we cannot guarantee. So whenever I can give some knowledge to my daughter or my son, I always try to do it, you know, because we live in uncertainty, bro. Yeah.
All right. On that note, Bobi Wine.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure.
And the best of luck, man.
Cheers, man.
All right? Cheers.